Welcome to Design Your Life, the podcast where we explore applying design principles to everyday life. I'm your host and founder of Frost Collective, Vince Frost. Welcome to the fourth episode of Design Your Life, from Lego to skyscrapers, the life of an architect. I'll be speaking to some of the most influential architects who are shaping our cities and the way that we live. We'll go behind the facade to understand what inspires them and how they juggle business and family life, and the responsibility that comes with designing the places, cities, and destinations that we live, work, and play in. Today I'll be speaking with Tribe Studio Architects founder Hannah Tribe. Listen in as we talk about how she founded her own practice 1 year out of university and the importance of thinking in a deep way when designing, why taking a collective approach is essential to delivering a brilliant project. Hey Hannah, welcome to Design Your Life.
Thanks, Vince. It's great to be here.
Oh, cool. How you doing?
Really well, thanks. Beautiful day.
It's an amazing day, isn't it? What did you do this morning?
I walked the dog. I did the, mental school drop-off situation and then calmed down by throwing the ball to the dog in the park.
Oh, my God. Great stress relief.
Yeah, and this early autumn light it's like a little gift when it glances in. I was down Rushcutters Bay and I was just bouncing off the water and it's really soft golden colour.
Beautiful.
And the yachts were clinking in the wind. It was great.
I live up in Avalon, and the evenings are like that. So around 5 to 6, it's just that golden light bouncing off of Pittwater, and it's just very magical, isn't it?
It's really magical, really soothing. And you must be looking across water into bush as well, which is
exactly.
Which is one of the gifts of Sydney, I think.
And so your last name is Tribe. Is that a made up name, or is that
How
your real
good
name?
Is it?
It's
I know,
good.
and I should have been a rapper. It's a real missed opportunity with a name like Tribe.
It's super cool. So is that your family name or your married name?
No, it's my family name. You couldn't change it, feminist or not. It comes from, it's an English name. They were a family of clockmakers from Petworth in England somewhere, and they've just had this cool name, the Tribes, or We Tribes, I suppose.
Yeah, cool. And I heard your dad was an architect, or is an architect.
Yeah, he is an architect. Dad's an architect. He he was a partner in a practice for most of his career, and he retired from his practice about 15 years ago, and has been working for me, kind of unreliable fashion ever since. So he's amazing. He's a real link to the craft of architecture, in his hand drawing particularly, and working out of tricky things.
And what do you mean by unreliable?
Oh, he's a long distance walker. So sometimes you'll be like, Dad, I thought you were coming in today. And he goes, oh, sorry, darling, I'm in La Perouse. I'm like, what are you doing in La Perouse? Just went for a walk, darling. Oh. So he's got a rich and varied life. And
growing up in a creative household, that shaped your perspective on the world?
I think so. My mum was a weaver as well before she went into communications and communication strategy, but very, very creative temperament, I think, and also she had very strong autonomy drive, and then Dad always had his own practice. So I think between that kind of creative headspace and low-level entrepreneurialism, I think I'm probably, not really a surprise.
Yeah, and you've got two sons, I hear.
Yes, two little boys.
Well, they're 11 and 8.
11 and 8.
Yeah.
Yes.
And are they in a creative household as well?
I suppose they're often around the studio, and probably I try to keep work and home pretty separate, and the only work I do at home is creative work. I try not to write, contracts at home or boring letters. I just build models and draw with a pencil. So they see that. Our oldest son is not very interested in drawing at all, but our younger son is probably more interested in drawing. So I think one of the beautiful things about parenthood is they just are who they are, and you can already see that they're just making their own path.
Are they sporty? A lot of Aussie kids are sporty.
Sport. Both of them love sport. The old one in particular is completely obsessed. He loves playing of sport, he loves the team spirit, and he loves the statistics and mathematical underpinning of all these things I don't even have words for. So he's really into. Oh,
that's sport. Interesting. So you're saying earlier that your husband was a lawyer.
Yeah.
And now runs a alcohol business.
Well, yeah, works in alcohol.
So is that do you think he's got that from your husband?
Certainly the sport thing. It's interesting because the sport hasn't come from me in any way. But my family, my father and brother are quite sporty. But my husband's very sporty and active and kind of goal focused in a sporty kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think my younger son's very much like him.
That's cool. Did you always want to be an architect?
No, I didn't want to be an architect. I think having a father as an architect and dad's practice.
An unreliable dad.
He was a very reliable. He was a very reliable dad and a wonderful dad and very reliable in his own practice. He's just a terrible employee. Or he's a fabulous employee, but his time management skills are curious.
Yeah.
He travels a lot. He's having a great time. So in his practice, that kind of turned me off architecture. I don't know if you remember green Vico. That vinyl on drawing boards.
Yeah.
So my enduring image of it is like late 70s, early 80s, hideous grey carpet, the green Vico, all these men with big beards and brown cardigans with fags out of their mouths and the big ashtray on the side and the parallel rules going up and down the Vico and the ash is dropping off. And I probably only saw it once, but it's just this enduring image of a kind of, texture of 1970s wool and the fag smoke and the green vinyl. I was just like, this is the worst.
So it looked technical and looked very male-dominated.
It was all men. There was one woman after a while.
Probably.
Oh, yeah, there were the girls in reception. They weren't women, Vince. They were girls. There was one woman architect.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's super there was no diversity, really. And also, I think architecture looks really, really boring from the outside. To be fair to Dad, I think they're having a great time because you're working out these really complex things, difficult problems, synthesising a whole lot of disparate information, going through the meditative practice of drawing at the same time. So it's actually, like, you couldn't have a better job. It's awesome. But if you watch somebody doing a job that's involving a deep level of concentration and drawing threads from everywhere, I mean, it's not a spectator sport.
It's really interesting because I've talked to a lot of architects and we do a lot of projects like Signs of Wayfinding or Placemaker for developments. So we're working with a lot of architects over the years. And it's funny, when I've done this recording, the series, the From Lego to Skyscraper, I've noticed the intimate conversation like this. One thing has stood out for me is actually how careful and cautious architects, you're not, but how mostly they're quite cautious. And I was trying to work that out. Even committing to do the podcast was quite an effort to get them over the line.
Oh, right.
And just because they seem to be not spontaneous, they seem to be very much very calculated. And it must just come from the architect's mind of when you're designing buildings, there's a lot at stake. There's a lot complicated and complex process to go through.
I also think there are a few things going on in the mindset of the architect that start at university that I've been very vocal about and very active in trying to dispel in my own career.
Okay.
And that is the hectic and damaging level of criticism and the delivery method of criticism within universities. And I can remember, I'll tell an anecdote rather than being general. I remember when I was in
that helps me.
5th year. Oh, good. Better radio, sure. Less cautious.
Yeah.
So 5th year architecture, we'd been working all semester towards the delivery of a project, and the crits were going on all day. So an architectural crit, you've worked and you've done all these all-nighters and you've been working, producing a bazillion drawings. You pin them up. Your tutor comes to... your tutor invites a bunch of their peers to come and have a discussion about the work, which is a great idea, right? To talk about student work in an interesting way, to really engage in an open conversation about, what this might mean for architecture. And isn't that the best conversation? Because ultimately architecture is this expression of our humanity. So it's a great conversation, you want to enter into it. But the reality of that is that you get a lot of ego in the room. So not always, because not all people have... damaging and voracious egos, but some do. And in this particular crit session we had, so we were working all semester, it was a big group project, and we'd presented in the morning and had a really great discussion. Then at lunchtime, all the tutors went out and had a boozy lunch. And they came back and they just annihilated a full afternoon of
Alcohol influenced.
Alcohol influence. They were showing off to each other at the expense of these, 21-year-olds who had a lot of respect for them and just felt completely demolished by it.
That's brutal.
And I think the brutality, as you say, of that gets embedded. And I think the other thing about architecture, or particularly about buildings, is that it's really hard to deliver a building at all. And there's just so much that goes into it. It's blood, sweat and tears.
Yeah.
And then to get that from a building to a thing that classifies as architecture is even harder again. And then to get it from architecture to architecture that's worthy of having a discussion about. So to get into that top 5% of everything that's built is really, really hard.
Kind of against the odds, isn't it?
It's against the odds, but they're the only ones that are worth talking about. So we demolish each other's work in order to have a constructive cultural critique around architecture. It's really important to have that conversation. But we've got this culture of brutal criticism, and you only attract it if you reach a certain level. So I think it makes sense that people are protective of their psychological space.
Do you think people are still taught in that way?
I'm not sure. I haven't taught at university since I had kids.
Right.
Look, I hope it's changing.
You must have been a nightmare.
Teaching, oh my God, I was so savage.
After lunch, Jesus.
Oh, gee whiz.
Well,
I was slaying them.
You talked about ego, and I was reading an article that you did with Karen McCartney, and it said you talked about the kind of how the collective mind works and how you love that. You mentioned that the architect's role is a weird one. You process around listening with an open heart and completely suppress our ego. And then during the concept design, we have to shift to mega ego, which I found is really interesting. Can you unpack that? Because I've often taught, people said, leave your ego at the door for kind of collaborative work. But people don't often talk about it coming back into the process. And so when you come back with your mega ego, what does that mean?
Well, I think I probably meant then, and I might change the language if I were to describe the same idea now.
Okay.
But I suppose in that instance, I mean, you come back with a clarity of intention, the setting of a very high ambition for a project that ultimately is what will determine its quality, or certainly give it no chance if you set a low ambition.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, you do this kind of intense listening, gathering of information, open-mindedness and open-heartedness. And as that information starts to coagulate into a design direction, to get it moving forward, it needs to be packed in really densely with intent. It needs to be given momentum. It needs to be given ambition, as I said, and that's going to come from the architect. The architect has to do that driving in order to harness the energy of the client. They have to have heard that really clearly, but then they need to channel that into an ambition, and also to tie together all the disparate strands of information from all the consultants and to weave that into something that makes sense and is ultimately in line with the client's vision. So is that ego? It's probably still, it's not ego, is it? Because the ego would be destructive in that space or need to own everything. It's, I guess it's leadership.
Creative confidence.
Yeah. You do need to go from listening to telling at some point.
Yeah.
And then know if we do that, it won't be architecture anymore.
Yeah.
Be quite clear about that.
So you curate the outcome. So you have all these different people, influences and conversations, and then you come back with a direction that you feel confident with. Yeah, that's cool. You founded your studio, Tribe Studio Architects, in 2003. We met a little while after that or before that? Yeah, no, it must have been after that.
I think after it, very briefly, yeah.
Okay, and were you working with Dirtbag Block or in the same space?
No, I was working with Dirtbag Block straight out of university, so in 2002. That was my first job. I would think I was a really terrible employee.
Really?
But I got to work, terrible.
Why? Smoking at the drawing board.
I was smoking out the window, actually.
Oh, were you? Okay.
Those were the days.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I think that first year out of uni is a really tough time. You go from doing, I was a really ambitious and successful student. I did really well at university, so I'd done six years of sketch design, concept design, and written 2 really hectically boring theoretical theses, and I had no practical skills, and I didn't understand how much the first 10 years of practice were an apprenticeship in architecture.
So it was tough. Was it a bit of coming down after that?
No, not really, because I was too naive.
Ah.
I didn't.
Did Neil teach you at uni?
No.
Oh, Camilla?
At uni then? No, neither of them.
And do you think that their work influenced you? Usually you're only there for a short period of time.
Yeah, I was only there for a short period of time. Oh, look, I'm a huge admirer of their work, I think. I think certainly the difference between my dad's practice, which was very commercially minded, and Neil and Camilla's, which at the time wasn't commercially minded at all. I think it was really great to try and to see those 2 poles within the profession and navigate my own path somewhere in the middle.
Did it seem like chaos to you? If your dad was so structured?
No, I wasn't. I didn't have the skills to be able to assess it critically.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, Neil's a wonderful guy and good friend. I interviewed him. He's part of the series as well, so I've been a huge fan of their work over the years. Yeah, so why did you start your practice?
Well, it was kind of an accident. I didn't really want to. So
So that was after the 1 year of working with those guys. Wow, that's pretty brave.
I know, crazy. So I moved, I thought maybe I'd move country. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I was teaching at university with great kindness and compassion. Oh. And I was painting. So I thought maybe I wanted to be a painter or a different kind of designer, not necessarily an architect. Mm-hmm. Architecture seemed slow and difficult and unruly and just too much.
Well, in that 1 year?
Yeah, well, I think I got an idea of how much I didn't know.
Oh, my God. So Neil put you off architecture?
No, well, I was never really into it in the first place. No, Neil definitely didn't put me off architecture.
What? Yeah. After you did for 6 years and then you found that out?
I know. Well, it's a really great degree. Like, really great. So there's a lot of history and theory in it. I also did sociology. I did some landscape architecture. I loved sociology. I did some English. I did a lot of art and art studios. So it was just couldn't have been better, as well as design. So the design studio was a major thing. So I really loved the study. I didn't like the practice, and in fact, I didn't feel committed to a career as an architect until I was about 5 years into my own practice. I was on site and I was like smelling the sawdust and the cement, and like, oh, this is the best.
You love that, yeah.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
Amazing.
It's the best.
And so was it just you in the beginning for a while, or how long did it take before to get some projects coming through?
Well, a couple of friends said, hey, can you do a reno for me? So I did that, and that's what we did kind of for 5 years, and eventually started growing from, did a tiny bit of retail and some commercial fit out, and, now we're across a bazillion sectors. I really love it. I guess I love it with the love of a convert.
Yeah, wow. Well, you've turned that around.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you said earlier you had like 17 people working with you. It's probably at architecture school, uni, they probably didn't teach you how to run a business necessarily.
No.
How did you pick that up?
Well, getting it wrong a lot, I think, seems to be my MO. Mm-hmm. And then when I had kids, I learnt to delegate, which has just been the best thing ever. And I think it's something that happened to me younger than most architects because, you don't have to delegate. You can keep working 60 hours a week, all night, doing everything, doing a bad job of all the stuff you don't understand. Yeah. So I've been really good at bringing in skills that I didn't have in that running a business space. So that's been great.
And your dad been coaching you through all that?
Not so much. I think so. Dad's business is much more commercial, and I think he disagrees with a lot of the more creative decisions I make. So no, I've charted my own path. I think relative to.
Does he tell you to say "I told you so"? Or
he's pretty good about that. He'll be, as we've moved from doing a lot of small projects to fewer larger projects, he's been like, see, but then also he often do a document review and he'll be like, what are you doing that for? That looks stupid kind of thing. And then he'll come and see the project and be like, oh, okay, which is really nice. I don't think it matters how old you are. Having the approval of your parents still feels pretty lovely.
Yeah, that's always nice. As long as they don't gloat too much. But
I'm working on being a gloaty parent myself. That's one of my aspirations.
Mom, if you're listening in, stop gloating so much. So I was looking at your website this morning. I was just like amazed by I know you do more than houses now, but the number of homes that you've done, residential, is incredible. And every single one, no two look the same. They're all quite varied in their how you've executed those.
Yeah, it's a really terrible brand position to have, I think. And
Why?
Well, I think a lot of people want to know what they're going to get, and whereas we say, well, what do you want? And it's been a really interesting creative process to try and enter into the minds of our clients and work with trying somehow to deliver their vision rather than I think houses are really interesting, and we'll always do houses.
Yeah.
It's the only building type where you're working with the people who live in them. And so they're absolutely about that family unit, whatever shape it is. Whereas all the other types, you're working for somebody who's building for somebody else. So with that, we can really experiment. It's not about us at all. It's about them. And I think that's allowed us to explore a lot of different architectural idioms, to really dive into architectural heritage, and which I love. I really love pulling old buildings apart and then putting them back together in a way that makes sense. So, we've built a lot of houses.
Yeah, it's amazing. And have you found over the years that, when you've had clients, do you enjoy the client's involvement in that, or are there times you prefer having just, get a kind of top view of what they want and then you go away and come back with solutions?
I think it really depends on the individual client. Some of the most interesting clients we've had are not visual or aesthetic people at all, and they will commission the most ambitious projects, weirdly, whereas people, which I found surprising. That's been a surprise.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I really like working closely with clients, but there is a point where they've got to leave us alone.
Yeah.
And I think there's that very boring part of, very boring for the client, really fun for us, where we're working it all out. Okay, so this is the vision, now we've got to deliver it, and the pipes can't clash with the beams, can't clash with the electrical, so we just need them to just give us space to deliver that part of the process.
So do you design houses the way your clients want to live, or how you think they should live?
Oh no, definitely wouldn't be didactic about how anyone should live. We try to understand how they live, and I think how they want to live. So I think there's something inherently aspirational about dreaming about the house of the future, because you're dreaming about your family growing up, or yourself having more leisure time, or having parties, or being able to pursue your hobbies and your interests. So there's this really potent dreaming that goes into thinking about a house. So we try to engage with that and deliver on it.
And what are the kind of, once a house is built, because it's a long process, isn't it, and often quite stressful and full of surprises. What's the kind of what have people said when they've been in the house for a few days or a few weeks or a year or whatever?
We've had one client who sent us a text every day for a year to tell us to make an individual observation about the house every day. So it's like a piece of conceptual art. It's pretty cool. There's a few of the fun ones.
Not complaining, but positive.
No, not
feedback.
complaining. It's leaking.
Where's the plug hole?
Yeah, totally. No, to say it was really a very beautiful exercise. And then towards the end of the year, the text became more poetic. So when the sun hits the water in the pool and it hits the ceiling, it looks like a David Hockney. And
could you have planned for that? Are these accidental things?
I think there are always delightful surprises. We always plan to use light in a way that where there's a change, it changes the form across the day and across the year. The light in Sydney is so amazing. I mean, it's a construction tool on its own. Yeah. That way that we get these deep black shadows and really intensely lit surfaces externally, and then what that means in an interior of a space. That's really fun material to play with, but also that thing about architecture is so static, and you want it to be really permanent as a sustainability initiative. You don't want to knock things down. You want them to have, presence and a lasting quality. So then how can you enliven it by controlling the behaviour of light in a space?
A kind of question came to my head just now. Was this around, that you design a house for a particular person or family use, and it's you work with them on kind of unpacking that. What happens when someone else buys that place and moves in? Do they have the same experience?
I'm not sure. I mean...
Not texting you?
We haven't been texted by new owners. We've lost some clients because they've said, hey, can you do up our house? And then they've gone and bought a house that we did somewhere else. And they're like, I just wanted to try a studio house. I didn't need to go through the process.
Oh, geez.
But they haven't. No, that's good. That's fine.
How tailored is it, I guess I'm saying, for those people? And is that tailoring is what people are saying during the process and the brief and all that? Is there a lot of similarities each time?
I think one of the really... I think when we get a heritage house, like a really interesting old beauty, and we're converting that for a family with kids, we have to push that house through an inversion in its in the values of the house. So we've got this beautiful big arts and crafts house that we're teasing apart in Bellevue Hill at the moment, and it's gorgeous, big old dumpy dame. But the arts and crafts was all about interiority and looking inwards and views internally. The front garden was really flash, and you presented a beautiful face to the street, and the back garden was really utilitarian, so clothes were dried there, and that's where the food was grown and so on. And I think the way we live now is that we want to invert that, the leisure space of the house becomes the back garden. So then how do you honour the bones of the house, the intention of that house, but also update it for contemporary life? And there's an embedded feminist issue in all heritage house restoration, where the engine room of the house, the laundry and the kitchen and the workspaces were either spaces where the servants were sequestered or the women were hidden to do that work. So when we take that house and turn it into something where domestic labour is a shared role, what does that mean spatially? I'm really interested in that, because I think that's really at the heart of how we live, and how, ultimately the way we build housing is how we express ourselves as a culture, and that seems to be the big move.
Wow. And you talk about ornate detail. You're kind of interested in ornate details, because obviously in the past it's been kind of a simplicity, and the opposite of that, I guess, in architecture recently. Yeah,
I'm interested in, I suppose when we do a heritage project, it's unpacking the logic of that place. So I've just finished a big Victorian house, and the Victorian's so interesting because it's ultimately modular. It's a modular construction type, much more akin to modern construction, you'd think, by looking at it, because, the Victorians, the big steep roofs and the frills on everything.
They were like kits, weren't they, really?
Yeah, but they were kits, and you'd go to the moulding shop and you'd buy your angels and your cherubs and your frilly cornices, but it was all off the rack and all modular and pre-made. So then when we add on to a Victorian house, how can we embody that spirit and logic of that construction without doing a gross pastiche? I think the other thing in heritage is you see that construction floors are covered with decoration. Is the architecture I graduated into is like, well, you can't have any construction floors. Everything needs to be millimetre precise, but people can't afford to build like that in all circumstances. So there need to be other ways to build, and I'm really interested in exploring that and taking cues from the past.
Oh, really interesting. Has sustainability always been a non-negotiable for you when you're designing homes for your clients?
Yeah, I think we just have to be responsible, and buildings need to last. I think that embodied energy in a building, it's really, it's a huge responsibility to spend those materials. And so we need to be as responsible as we can in doing so. And
what about, do your houses that you do now, are they off the grid, or are you looking at kind of alternative energies?
We're doing some off the grid. We haven't done it off the grid in an urban area, but we've got some remote houses that are there or almost there. Yeah, I'm really interested in doing that. I'm also interested in how we live in cities, and because being off the grid is in a city is pretty tough, particularly when it comes to sewer. But how could how could we be more communal about it? Could we see ourselves in smaller cells? So instead of having huge centralised plants, you lose energy along the system. How could we be more sustainable in a cellular way?
Yeah, exactly. So how important is it then to ensure that we as a society are building environmentally conscious buildings for the generations to come?
Oh, I think it's so important. It's really the only important thing. You can see it's now Bill Gates's big mission once he tackles agriculture is to tackle use of concrete and steel. And I think we need to be really responsible with the embodied energy in our buildings, but also our carbon footprints. It's on us, right? I mean, I kind of woke up from the snooze of having toddlers and discovered I was one of the adults in the room, and now's the time we got to get this happening.
Because the younger generation is equally passionate about it and pushing it as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Less passive than previous. You use a lot of brick in your work in such an elegant, no-nonsense way. Are you surprised that some people still see brick as a low-end product and finish and haven't caught up onto the environmental benefits?
Well, I really love brick. I think there's something very Sydney about brick. I think we've got this, in our older areas, you've got a language of kind of brick and brick tile and tree canopy and sunlight. So the way the sun hits a brick feels like home. Bricks smell amazing after the rain. I also really love that they register the hand in construction, so that they're made out of earth, water, and fire, and then they're at a scale that you can pick them up and lay them in a wall, and then you can read that craft and you can read the human hand in the building. So they're, but in terms of using a lot of them, we're pretty agnostic about building materials. So the first project we did was like a really abstracted white box. We did 10 years of white boxes. Then we did a brick house. We seem to be in our 10 years of using a lot of bricks. I think there's a place for all sorts of different materials. So I'm not wedded to them as the only way to build, but I think they do have a real particularity in certain parts of Sydney and a grace and romance.
It seems to be the last 5 years or so, people are really taking brick and pushing the boundaries with it. So you get a lot of curves and unusual shapes happening, which instead of just being a straight brick wall.
I guess the worry then is we've got to always worry about trend and fashion in architecture, I think. But I think beautifully detailed and constructed brick buildings using bricks that are good bricks, because there are good bricks and bad bricks. There's a real romance to this. If you think about that Tonkinsalaika Greer project in the reservoir in Paddington, and the way the Victorians built brick arches, and just that permanence and timelessness and connection we have to them.
The skill with that's incredible.
Yeah, or the UTS polychromatic brickwork, those Victorian bricks, in that time when really ornately laid bricks in these really grandiose gestures was an expression of the might of the empire. There's something, they're very evocative.
Yeah, it's kind of permanence versus the 2x4 versions that we see coming up. Do you have a favorite material? Do you have a palette that you always work with?
No. Completely agnostic about materials. We're kind of interested in exploring them. Often, how we'll start something. Well, for instance, we've got a new project and we were talking about what ambition we were going to apply to it. Like, what was this going to be a project about? And it's going to be a project about plantation timber. So how can we build a language of permanence into this particular project that only uses plantation timber? And that sets up a whole set of constraints. So spans can only be so big. We need to think about long grain and end grain in terms of durability. So then the starting with a material is going to have an impact on form, design, detail, mood, feel, everything. And that, for me, is a really interesting way to begin. We often begin like that with brick if somebody's mad for bricks. but I don't have a favourite. I think it's all a great palette to be using. I would never use. I don't like really. I'm reluctant to lean into some new technology in building. I think the past 15 years has been terrible problems with that rendered polystyrene stuff. I'm not into any of that stuff. I think we have a responsibility to build in a way that things will last.
What about toxicity? There's been a lot of materials that are toxic. Do you stay away from them?
Yeah, absolutely. And interested in also sick building syndrome. So, we've got an electromagnetic radiation specialist on some things. A lot of toxic building materials. I just got to look at the problems with asbestosis and now the silicon problem with cutting composite materials. It's just terrible.
It's still happening.
Yeah. And then radioactive granites in kitchens in Northern America.
Jesus.
It's nuts. We need to be careful.
Wow. Is that often discussed in projects? Do clients say,
Yes.
hey, I want to make sure this paint you're using is not toxic or cancerous or whatever?
Some people do. Some people are really, really aware about it.
Other people are oblivious to it, I guess.
Yeah. And I think there's a kind of mentality in parts of the building industry of, this is how we've always done it, and a real reluctance to change. You can see that as there's stagnation in parts of the industry, and we try not to work with people who think like that.
Wow. So buildings can be designed, your buildings are designed to give you energy and I guess make you feel good in them. Last thing you want is
do it, right?
Yeah, last thing you want is the building, without you knowing, is actually making you sick.
There's a real problem in Sydney particularly because we've got very humid atmosphere and we've got some really legacy of terrible construction. And particularly in older brick buildings that don't have adequate ventilation, you can get some pretty hectic moulds in them. So it's a serious issue.
How does one do a health check on your building?
There are building biologists, so that's a specialty field. They're pretty amazing, and they can test for allergens and toxins within the air environment.
It'd be good to bring one round with you when we're looking at houses to buy, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's becoming more common actually.
Because we do like a building check with like termites and stuff, but you don't do it. You do also around, is there asbestos there or rising damp and things like that, but you don't do it in terms of toxicity.
Well, damp's really a thing to worry about. So I guess lead paint, damp. If you've got damp, you've got mould. And everybody's got mould in some way in Sydney. The air's just that humid. But old buildings particularly have a problem.
You refer to your work designing homes for your clients as portraiture. Can you tell me a bit about that and what it is for you?
I think that beautiful thing about designing a home is that you're working directly with the client. And Lucian Freud has this beautiful quote where he says, everything is portraiture, everything is autobiography. And I feel like in the expression of others in our work, we actually write our own story. Well, I think I'm in a creative transition zone from working on those houses that are all about somebody else and all about an expression of their personality, their aspirations, their family. And as we move from doing a lot of houses to doing projects where we're not working for the end user, so we're doing a big commercial building on George Street, we're doing multi-unit residential, doing a hotel. When we're doing those, we've got to imagine multiple different users. How can I bring that suite of portraits, turn that into an autobiography, and then still make it very specific and personal to place and to the city, but ultimately it's not an expression of personality anymore. It's not a psychological exploration. So it's I think it's been a very rich exploration and will continue to be. Because it means we can be really open when we approach things.
And you talk about other projects you're doing overseas. Tell us about your project you're doing in Venice Beach, or you've done in Venice Beach.
So that's finished now. It's a house for an Australian family who he works in Hollywood, and she's got an international business. They're a pretty amazing family, and that's a beautiful family home. So they're Australians. They interviewed 11 local architects in California, and the 11th one was like, well, if you're showing everybody Tribe Studios work, why don't you just call Tribe Studio? So
had you done their house here?
No, we'd never met. So they called and we went and designed a house.
That's cool.
It was pretty cool.
Did you go to LA to look at the site and everything?
A couple of times. So did a few kind of 1 week charrettes. I'd go over, or the project architect on the job would go over, and we had a local collaborator who was helping us navigate the approvals process, which was the next level. You couldn't work out what the submission requirements were from LA City Hall. They just wouldn't tell you unless you turned up in person. It's so archaic, the mind boggles.
So it was harder than here?
Oh, so much harder than here. I mean, ultimately, if you're within the controls, the house will be approved. But then those chicken and egg things that we've got here, like they had a good one, like you had to have a certain amount of water pressure in the sprinkler system to run the thing, and that had to come off the mains, but there wasn't that much pressure in the mains because all the infrastructure is broken. So it was a real lesson in red tape, that one.
Wow. Did it compromise the design?
No, the design's beautiful. It's really cool. So they had a little timber bungalow on the site. We originally looked at restoring and extending that, but it was past its use-by date. So we built a kind of new timber frame bungalow and elevated it up in the sky, and then put some blade walls on the ground that capture 5 different gardens with individual personalities. And then this bedroom thing hovers above.
Wow.
It's cool.
Is it on your website?
No, not yet. It was in Vogue Living last month, I think, and we'll put it up after our client's is the owner and co-founder of Armadillo & Co., the rug company. So they're managing all the media on it. So when they finish with that, then it'll be our turn.
They have great rugs in there as well.
It's got great rugs.
So she's Australian too?
She's Australian.
I was wondering why they were in the States, because the showroom's there as well.
Yeah.
And you also worked on a project in Dubai?
Yeah, so we collaborated with Alexander & Co. on a Sean's restaurant on the top floor of the Dubai Opera House.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was wild.
And are you doing anything else overseas?
No, not at the moment. I mean, phone hasn't been ringing hot from overseas this year, Vince.
Well, yeah. Do you enjoy working on projects overseas?
Yes. Yeah, I do. It's really great to collaborate with. You have to have a local collaborator, which is really very interesting and rewarding. So we enjoy working overseas. We've done a couple of little things in the UK as well. It's a trickier time difference in terms of phone calls, but
yeah. And you talked about
it's much easier now.
You talked about working on larger scale projects now too. How did you make that transition? Just because someone asked you to do a larger project, you kind of went with it, or what?
Yeah, basically. Said sure. I think, so really it's, I think probably to circle back to your question about business, I think I have waited to be asked to dance, and it's the kind of work we've had has all been reactive. I've never chased work, and I think it's probably time to say, hey, we really like this city building stuff, and we're doing lovely things. So I think that's going to be the next 10 years.
And you're finally getting more of that anyways? So
it's happening organically.
Yeah, cool. And you said you're working on a hotel?
Yeah.
Is that a secret? Or
it's a secret.
I
can't tell you. It's going to be amazing.
Is it? No.
It's got a large heritage component, a lot of entertainment venues.
In Sydney?
No.
Outside of Sydney?
Can't tell you. Have to kill you.
Oh, my God.
There'd be blood on the studio walls.
Is most of your work in Sydney?
Most of our work's in Sydney.
Except for this place, of course.
Well, yeah, and there's outside of Sydney. So we've got a bunch of holiday houses outside of Sydney, Tasmania.
What motivates you outside of work?
Gosh, I'm so intrinsically motivated. It's like, I guess, what do I enjoy out of work? My most enduring hobby has been reading novels. I love novels and poetry. I like walking in the bush and paddling. I like being on the water under my own steam. So I like
paddleboarding.
Yeah, I paddleboard, I kayak, I like to sail as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like a sailing boat?
Yeah, I don't have a sailing boat, but I like to crew on boats.
Oh, cool.
I used to sail a little while.
Out of rush cutters?
Yeah. I mean, really, I'm in a kind of very low hobby stage of my life, so I get out of the paddleboard when I can. But I'd be lying if I said I'd
Once.
sailed in the last 5 years. Maybe
my
twice in the
God.
last 5 years, yeah.
Okay, all right.
So it's
So you're a
hanging
workaholic.
with my kids. I'm so not a workaholic.
Okay, good.
No way.
Yeah,
But I really love hanging with my kids.
yeah.
I love playing cards with kids, watching them play sport.
What's your home like? Presumably you've done
we live in a little terrace house that we renovated about 10 years ago, and we just built a kind of prototype house in Bundeena, which is a really crude and very relaxed little beach house prototype, which is built as a kit home that could be. I think there's been a huge success in modular building in Victoria where you deliver like whole houses, and we've had a lot of clients talk to us about modular building in New South Wales, and our topography, you know, we've got the Great Dividing Range, we've got the windy roads. It's really expensive to bring a whole house in.
Yeah.
So we thought we'd try a kit home module where it could be all pre-cut timber, minimise waste, and deliver that to site. So we gave that a whirl. It's pretty cute.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So we weekend there.
You still make it on site, but it's all cut.
Make it
to
on site,
size.
yeah. And I also like that supports local labour as well. So it's got a social sustainability aspect.
You talked about your sons being into sport. Is your husband into sport as well?
Yeah, he's
So-
he's
so
pretty
what-
sporty.
So, I mean, I find if I don't exercise for a long period of time, like several years, I get this build up of stress and not realizing what it is. So, I mean, just walking every day makes a big difference, but running's huge for me.
Yeah.
Do you kind of get your cardio
Yeah.
at all?
Yes, I walk a lot incidentally, and I try to exercise every day. So I either do like a pretty full on Pilates class or a spin class. I think you've got to get really hot and sweaty 3 times a week to keep your heart healthy. That's my exercise regime.
You've always done that?
Oh, look, there's no always, right? Because I think when the kids were babies, you just looked after babies and kept the business going, and there were only 2 things. I suppose when I say kids, I mean family, because you know investing in a happy relationship is really important as well. And I think as the kids get older, there's suddenly more room around the edges. So I try to exercise every day, meditate every day.
Oh, wow. Do you?
Yeah.
When do you meditate?
5 a.m.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Before everybody's awake.
Yeah. And then I don't always get to it, or I sleep in or whatever, but I, just sometimes I'll meditate in the garage at work or whatever,
Yeah.
just to take a
So it
moment
really
of
helps you.
silence. I think getting to silence is really important. So,
Silence in your head
yeah.
as well.
Yeah. So where you're listening, not talking so much.
So it's interesting. I mean, I get up about 5:30 now. I don't know. I'm going to bed at 9 most nights, which is ridiculous.
I'm the same. I used to stay up drawing until like 2 a.m. I go, I'm doing my best work. And then I was exhausted and drank too much coffee, too much alcohol. And now I go to bed so early, like I'll pass out reading the kids a story. But I'm up and bouncy and calm and clear early in the morning.
So you don't drink?
Not at the moment. I mean, at COVID, I pickled myself.
That's a familiar story. How did you cope with COVID, by the way?
It was
Must have been tough with the kids as well.
Well, it was. I suppose from a work point of view, it was very stressful. I think that first month, it felt like the whole world was going to implode, which most of the world did implode, and we were very lucky. We decamped to Bundeena. Took the kids out of school early, and then stayed down there for an extra term. So it was actually pretty amazing to be able to walk on the beach and in the bush, swim every day. So that was good. From a work point of view, it was very stressful. I think it felt like doing 3 times as much work to stay still. So that, constant kind of disaster cash flow planning and making sure we kept everybody's jobs secure, and then working out how to get all the kit working from home, like the IT. Holy cow! It was a lot.
I mean, we all thought it was the end of the world, and was the end of our businesses as well.
Yeah, I think we all went through that disaster zone. But the upshot for the business, I mean, I think I re-engaged my scrappy little Street Fighter business mentality, which is probably good. And then I think the best thing that's come out of it is this complete end of formality of work. So, we're all pretending we didn't have families and other commitments, and there wasn't a degree of chaos at home. We all thought we couldn't work from home, or we couldn't work with that much flexibility, but ultimately we can.
Yep.
Our office is now kids and dogs everywhere, which is awesome. Everybody's got flexible hours in some way or another. And it just, they're all incredibly intelligent, capable, talented adults in a creative field. Why on earth would we need to work with that kind of, industrial rigidity?
Did you feel, I kind of felt like it wasn't that I didn't trust my staff, but now I do. You know what I mean? It's like you're going from, that's how businesses run.
Yeah.
You got to be in there. We got to see people working. Everyone's going to be together.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a wonderful vibe with that, but there is that, people are just as productive when they're making it work from home or coming in and out or, managing their family or doing some exercising or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
It just kind of works better. It's almost like I've always worked like that since I started my business. I've always been kind of working wherever I am and making it work, whereas your staff tended to had to clock in and be there and be visible, whereas now everyone's working like I am.
Which is great, right?
Good.
I don't know
energy.
why we didn't think of it earlier. It
Some
makes so much
did.
sense for
some people
for
did, and they
creativity.
go, they made it work, and you go, do you reckon that would work?
Yeah.
The thought of having our team working from home one day a week was unmanageable.
Yeah. And I think it really suits some parts of architecture very well. So if you need long periods of uninterrupted concentration, just to be able to do that at home is great. And then to come to work and have the dynamism of collaboration is really fantastic. Yeah. The other thing that Zoom taught was when our guys would share their screen, so they're working in a 3D model of a building, you could just say pause there and draw over it with your finger and the purple pencil. It was the best. So instead of stop, print. But also for them, it was just this incredible
interaction, I guess.
Speed of creative collaboration.
Feedback.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
No print sketch.
So what's happened with, has this changed how clients come to you to kind of, when they're doing a home now? Is the kind of the brief change because of this?
Well, I think the fear will be that people want to get bigger and bigger houses again, which is ultimately the least sustainable thing we can do. So over the past 10 years before COVID, we were seeing the death of the home office. So people would have, a kind of filing zone for their medical records, but the laptop would move with them. But now with video conferencing and work from home, houses are growing again. And I think we also had a suite of briefs that came in with multiple home offices, gyms, all those things we suddenly had to do from home that people were wanting to enlarge their houses, and I think that's probably a worry. That would be a bad trend. Houses have been getting smaller ever so slightly for the last 10 years. For a while there, Australian houses were larger than American houses, topping out at 250 square metres on average for a new house, which is crazy. English houses are like 86 square metres.
Yeah.
So we've been seeing the trend come down. It would be really sad if it went up again.
Do you think the people having all this in their homes, like the gym and everything, are they healthier? Are they more likely to exercise?
I don't know. There's something so nice about. I've always been a kind of urban person, and I like that a lot of my life happens within a community. I love walking to school. I didn't know I wanted a community until I had kids at school, and suddenly you've got this. You know everybody. Our home, work, and school are all within 100 metres of each other. We know all the business owners, all the parents, all the kids in the streets. It's really lovely. So that idea of a kind of home that you press a button, drive into, and you don't have to leave all weekend because everything is there, to me that seems really sad. But, it suits some people, I guess.
You talked a lot about having collective approach. How important is it for you to collaborate with the right people, from clients to staff and so on?
I think there's a real magic in collaboration. And, we're starting to do this quite weird thing for design meetings within the office, which is instead of to sit down with the pencils, actually to take a walk. And so one person will describe something or describe a problem, and somebody will describe a solution. And in a verbalization of a design, we all imagine different things. And in that space between what we're imagining, we're finding is where something truly innovative happens. I think innovation's an overused word, but we might break through by hovering in that space of imagination without drawing anything for a bit longer, which I think is really interesting. So I'm super interested in that. And that's a kind of idea about meditation. It's the space between the thoughts where the magic happens. And what happens if we explore that, the void or the
Is that with the client or with your team?
We wouldn't, but that's within the team, so that's in the architectural team. But I think there's something to be said about that with our collaborators, so with structural engineers particularly and landscape architects. With the client, it's really an idea of deep listening and interrogation to really try and understand where they're trying to go.
And you talk about thinking in a deep way as well. I guess that's related to what you just said.
Yeah. I think it's. I think it would be easy, but ultimately unsatisfying to operate in a space of fashion or trend in the built environment. And I think the current set of circumstances, climate crisis, affordability crisis in Sydney in particular, there's an onus on us to think about it more deeply, to do better, and ultimately to reflect where we are as humans.
So I was going to wondering if there's room for generosity in design and construction in Sydney's cutthroat property market, where budgets are run at a shoestring and the cost of entry is so high. I mean, it's becoming unbelievably expensive here.
It's a disaster.
How do the younger generation navigate that?
I have no idea. I think it needs
immediate
attention. Meant to have an idea.
Let's go for a walk and talk about it.
Yeah, I think you need to walk and talk about that one. I think there's some really interesting things happening in Melbourne, and there's certainly fantastic things happening with co-housing and alternative housing models in Europe, particularly in Northern Europe. They're doing really innovative things, and there are things that have been happening since the 70s that just don't seem to be able to get off the ground in Sydney. I know there are a lot of people working on it.
Why is that, do you think?
I think our property prices are so high, and I don't think we can stop ourselves thinking about property as asset. Our tax structures are broken. People will invest in their home and not move out of a house that's the wrong size for them because that's a capital gains tax-free investment. That's a disaster. Yeah. I think negative gearing is a disaster for people entering the housing market. I think rental and tenancy system is a disaster for young people because there would be nothing wrong with renting for a long period except you can't get more than a 6-month lease and you can't hang a picture. So I think it's broken. The tax system's broken and causing problems. I think values are broken and causing problems. I think commercial developers have really raced to the bottom, and they're getting held to account now a bit more with the certification laws. But I think we've also had a generation of really junky, horrible buildings built that are going to create the slums of the future through strata laws. So we've got a lot of problems, and we've got a lot of people thinking about them. I'm interested to see what happens next. Let's have that walk.
I don't think the property in Sydney's ever gone down in value, has it?
No.
It's just continually going up, like in London. I guess, how do you save up for it? I mean, it's impossible to save up if the prices of the house keep going up all the time.
And it's creating this, or it's exacerbating the wealth divide. And we're going to become like the Americans. I mean, Bernie Sanders wrote this great article in The Guardian yesterday, and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos together have more wealth than the bottom 20% of Americans.
Wow.
And that's messed up.
It's obscene, isn't it?
It's obscene.
It should just be redistributed.
Yeah.
Having said that, I bet you'd like to design his house.
I don't even know.
It'd be a decent budget.
They have a lot of cast bronze elements in it, that house.
Yeah, it'd be on the moon or something.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Sure.
Do you ever say no to projects?
Yeah, we say no a lot. We say no more than we say yes. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what's the filter on that?
I think for houses, there are two things. So for houses, if we go and visit a site and that already has a house on it, if the clients don't offer me a glass of water, we don't do it. That's filter number one. And filter number two is if they've got really, I think there's a lot in a house that can be a status posturing exercise that I don't want to be involved in.
Just go back to the water one, because I'm intrigued by that. So what does that represent to you if someone doesn't offer you water?
If they're not going to offer the architect water, how are they going to treat the carpenter and the labourer? You know? If we become this team of people working for them and there's no effort to hospitality or generosity, then it's going to be bad for the people down the chain.
It's interesting that, isn't it? Because they're building a home to be a host in their own home. When do they start being a host? Some people aren't naturally hosts, I guess.
But also it can mean that maybe, you know, the architect's visiting is another part of a servant role, which means it won't be a true collaboration. So it feels to me like they wouldn't be entering the relationship from a place of mutual respect, potentially. So,
And do you say that?
And often I talk too much. I get thirsty. Come on.
Yeah. It's funny because we worked for a big airline. I can't say who it is, but I remember being in meetings with them in their headquarters, and they never offered us anything.
You should have said no to the job.
Well, I will now going forward. But it was surprising. I thought it'd be like someone coming around with a trolley. You know?
Chicken or fish.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, that's interesting. I very rarely say no unless it's something that is a project that could be kind of damaging the earth or a complete asshole, which is not very often these days.
But doesn't that mean you've got an infinite growth model? Like if you keep saying, or maybe it's probably a different delivery method. So if we say yes.
Ours are quicker turnarounds.
Yeah, we've got such a long turnaround.
That's true.
And the bulk of the work happens a year down the line. So that getting from council approval to ready to build is a really labour-intensive part. And if we take on too many projects, we have to grow too much, too rapidly. Cool. So I've got to be quite precise about it.
What defines a well-designed home for you?
I know it's a badly designed home is just poorly thought out and poorly built. A well-designed home is careful and considerate and generous. It's reflective of people's lives. But then, I mean, the thing about a home, as opposed to other building types, is they really take on the personality of the people who live there. And how much of what we do is kind of background set design that allows them to then prop the stage to play out their lives, and how much do they want us to be really present in the action.
Isn't it amazing the energy you get from a building like yours when you walk into one of your homes compared to a box, or compared to something which is kind of done on the cheap, or not the same light and material and all that? That feeling, imagine living. I mean, obviously, not everyone can afford to live in a well-designed space. I mean, unfortunately, why shouldn't everybody live in a well-designed space? That's a big question, isn't it?
I think that's a really good question. I think in Sydney, no one can afford to live anywhere, so well-designed or not. Construction in Australia is really expensive, and the labour's the expensive part. So I think developing a suite of architectural details that are actually quick to construct is part of that. Whereas as you get more mastery as an architect, you want to be more elaborate and you want to work with the best craftspeople. So there's a tension there, I think, in our creative practice. The Bundina home we did is really, really affordable. It's an experiment in affordable architecture, but ultimately it's still twice the cost of a project home. They can just churn out that rubbish so cheaply. But it doesn't make your heart sing. I think that thing about walking into a well-designed home that makes you feel better. And when you feel better, you're kinder and you spread good juju.
It makes you live better, doesn't it?
Makes you live better, yeah.
So have you designed your life?
I love this question. I think as a designer, you think about a design exercise as taking a set of constraints and a problem, working out if any of those constraints are within your power to influence or change, and what you have to accept, and then working out what to do with it. So yeah, to that extent, I have designed my life, and I treat it as an evolving design problem. I treat the business as my evolving design exercise, and life as a fun, engaging design process.
Well, on that note, That's the end of the podcast, but thank you so much, Hannah.
Thanks for having me, Vince.
Cool. Thanks for listening to the 4th episode of Design Your Life, From Lego to Skyscrapers, the life of an architect with Tribe Studio founder, Hannah Tribe. Tune in for the next week's episode. We'll be catching up with William Smart, one of Australia's most celebrated architects and founder of Smart Design Studio. Thank you all for listening. If you want to find out more about designing your life, head over to our website at designyourlife.com.au or on our social media at Frost Collective. If you enjoyed this episode and found it inspiring, please don't forget to review or subscribe.